My name is Helen Turner. I'm the Co-Artistic Director at E-WERK Luckenwalde in Germany, and I direct the space E-WERK Luckenwalde with my partner, the artist Pablo. This is E-WERK, as you can see. We're based 30 minutes outside of Berlin. And we set up E-WERK in 2019 with the vision to kind of pioneer alternative ecological and economic models for the cultural sector, which sounds like a bit of a mouthful, and I'll go on to explain how we're doing that. But that was the kind of big vision when we started. And just to give you a little bit of background about how we started, Pablo's an artist, as I said, and his practice revolves around generating electricity, which he started doing about 10 years ago. And he started doing this because as an artist, he found himself in this position where he was being invited to show and exhibit around the world, but never for enough money. And he found himself in this very financially precarious position where he wasn't even able to afford his electricity bill. And so he essentially just started generating his own electricity just to cover his costs. And then this kind of idea sparked, and he saw this huge potential with the material of electricity. And he thinks about electricity as kind of the greatest metaphor for contemporary art there is, this kind of energy that exists, that you're not really sure what it is, how it works, but it has this impact, it has this affect on you. So this kind of snowballed, and he started producing electricity. So this is Pablo and I in the turbine hall with our dog Cole. And we, just to give you a little bit of background about who we are as well. So Pablo and I met in London about 12 years ago when we were both studying art. So Pablo at the Royal College and myself at Chelsea. And so then Pablo started producing energy through these different sculptures and installations. This is a piece called Off-Road, which is in the northeast of Germany. And it's a wind farm, essentially. And the wind farm is built out of detritus found on motorways. So this wind turbine is actually motorway poles. And then this is a cone that you'd also find on the motorway. And then these are kind of old pylon infrastructures. So he wanted to reuse everything that was being used on the highway to create ecological green energy. So this actually produces enough energy to power the sculpture park where it is housed in the northeast of Germany. And then this block here in the middle is the mini power station. So this was one piece he did. And then another piece is called Schmarotzer, which is where he used solar power to generate electricity. And so what he did is he actually placed these solar panels on electricity boards in Stuttgart and stole the light energy that the advertising signs were generating in order to power a light bulb in an exhibition space. So again, it was using this electricity, this energy that already existed in the world, but to kind of focus it into actually generating. So I think a lot of Pablo's concerns are kind of, he always says that we don't have an ecological crisis, we have a creative crisis. So there's enough energy out there in the world, we just have to focus on it, we just have to create new creative innovations for it. So then fast forward kind of 10 years, and then Pablo had this wild idea to transform a power station from the fossil fuel era, so brown coal, into an ecological green power station, a Kunststrom Kraftwerk. So Kunststrom is the energy that he produces, which directly translates as art power. And he looked for years to try and find this power station. And then somebody advised, why don't you have a look in Luckenwalde, which is on the outer rim of Berlin. It's a kind of post-industrial city with over 150 listed buildings, which are mainly abandoned. Maybe you'll find something. So he did, he came to Luckenwalde, and he was actually led to the next door swimming pool, which you can actually see here. You can see my mouse. And this is a Bauhaus swimming pool, dates back to 1928. Phenomenal architecture also, loved it. Then he clocked the power station and he says he was electrified, loved it, and managed to find the landlord. It wasn't on the market, tracked the landlord down, see if it was possible to purchase it. He said no. Pablo essentially went into 1.5 years of negotiations with the man to try and persuade him to give him the power station. He finally said yes, but it was an astronomical price. Obviously, we couldn't afford that, or he couldn't afford it as an artist. Managed to then went back into negotiation, managed to persuade him to give it to him essentially for a philanthropic rate. Pablo sold everything he had and packed up and moved to Luckenwalde and bought this building. And we've still got a massive mortgage, but we're able to do it essentially. He jumped, he took the risk. So this is the front of E-WERK. As you can see, it's got this incredible stained glass that supports the front door. So it was built in 1913 as a brown coal power station. Yeah, so this is the entrance, and it's a real kind of champion of electricity. So 1913 was a time, it was sort of 20, 30 years after the discovery and industrialization of electricity. So electricity still kind of occupied this kind of terrain of the occultish and the mysterious and the unknown. People were suspicious of it. And we're friends with a lot of the men who used to work in the power station when it was a brown coal power station. And apparently they used to call it cold light because it was this suspicious entity. So the building is really kind of a champion of the virtues of electricity, which is why they painted it with all these kind of really heraldic images. So this is it back in 1913 with this beautiful car outside. And then, so this is the turbine hall, which is at the heart of the building. And this is 360 meters squared, so it's this colossal space, but it really feels more like a kind of municipal ballroom than industrial turbine hall, which are kind of more normal to industrial power stations. So when Pablo told me about this project, he said, just come over to Germany and just have a look at this building, see what you think. And I was, of course, just completely blown away by the kind of potential and opportunity of this building to curate as well as a curator. And then this is the engine room. So this is the space that Pablo essentially generates the electricity with. So this dates back to 1913. All the infrastructures are the original mechanical infrastructure that used to burn brown coal in these huge furnaces on the left and right. And Pablo has reactivated it. And in order to do that, he worked alongside many of the men, as I said, who used to work in the power station, to learn from them, to understand how it was possible for this machine to actually work, and whether it was in fact possible to reanimate it, and instead of transporting brown coal, transport wood chips. And they were his biggest advocate. I mean, a lot of people in the contemporary art world thought when we talked about this project that we were switching the power station on metaphorically. The men, however, who used to work here understood it, and they were like, yeah, of course it's possible. You know, this is how you do it, essentially. And they shared engineering plans, images, old correspondence letters. It was this really heartwarming thing that happened where they brought all these souvenirs they had taken from the power station. They reattributed them back to the power station, gave them back to Pablo so he could learn. And I just want to quickly show you this clip from a documentary that was made about E-WERK, which shows the kind of infrastructure that Pablo has reanimated. So here. So this is Pablo coming. This is Pablo coming into the engine room, and as you can see, it's quite a huge space. The engine room. We're actually only using a quarter of the engine room at the minute, so it is possible that we could actually generate a lot more electricity. But he's basically, this is the old control center, which he's got working again. And this is the big cog that is essentially in the altars of the engine room. And this is the conveyor belt, which when we took on the building was underwater. It was completely derelict. And it used to transport the coal. And so Pablo spent months and months and months repairing this, and we have this volunteer program, and we've had over 100 volunteers come out to work with us and help, and they come with these incredible skills. You know, some are plumbers, electricians, we've had accountants come and work with us, so we couldn't really have done it without them, but they helped Pablo to reactivate this machine. And when he did it, he calls it the dinosaur, this conveyor belt. When he did it, there was this huge roar throughout the whole building because everyone was so excited they'd actually managed to accomplish this, turned it back on again. So, I mean, it seems like a simple idea, but for me, it's this phenomenal engineering achievement Pablo has accomplished. So, and then I'll just quickly leave it on for a moment. Oh, so this is the chimney sweeper that came down to kind of give us the green light that we could actually generate electricity. And this is the ground floor of E-WERK, and this is the wood gas machine. So this is where the wood chips get fed into, and they go into a dynamo that then produces electricity that then powers the whole house, and also any excess electricity that is generated gets fed into the national grid. Then we have clients throughout Germany who've switched to Kunststrom. So they have powered their office, they power their studio, institutions have switched, museums have switched. So they have the electricity that is powered by us. So essentially anybody in Germany can currently switch to Kunststrom. And then the sales of that, so everybody's electricity bill funds the contemporary art program at E-WERK. So that's the kind of alternative economic model that is also ecological we're trying to champion here. And I mean, I think it's quite interesting in terms of a lot of institutions are based in these relics of the fossil fuel era power stations. I can think of Tate, for instance, in London, but no one is actually powered by the means of their own production. So we're the first 100% CO2 neutral institution that is also powered by its own production in the world. So yeah, this is Pablo being very excited about Chimney Sweeper coming in and giving him, saying, yes, you can go on the grid. So that was kind of an epic moment for us. And then, so then I come in as well into this. So I'm a curator. I previously worked with Claire at Cast Sculpture Foundation, and now I work at E-WERK. And so when Pablo said, come and do this, I was thinking, how can we, what is the curatorial program here? You know, what is the most exciting thing to do? And and it was also at the time of Brexit, it was 2019. And I really wanted it to be ambitious, international, and also accessible. So I really wanted it to ensure that it really addressed the kind of local community here, didn't isolate them. It wasn't this contemporary art island in the middle of Brandenburg, but that it was also really challenging. Really, it spoke to kind of the Berlin audiences, but that it was also international. I was really encouraging these kind of cross-border dialogues, not kind of making Europe smaller, but making it bigger. That was my kind of ambition. So we opened in September 2019, and I invited London Festival Block Universe to curate Power Night, which I then run as an annual performance festival. And they took over essentially all the spaces of E-WERK and invited 8 different contemporary artists to activate the spaces, which also included the next door swimming pool, which I mentioned earlier. And I'm just going to play you a short video. So here we go. So this is Block Universe's curated evening, Power Night. Ooh. Focus not enough. You think I don't know about power? Watching me out, inside my eyes, but now wake up. So you might have clocked also in that video that there was a wrestling match going on in the Turbine Hall. And this was actually a real moment. Luckenwalde is a famous wrestling city, which I didn't know. But this was a piece by Nina Bayer, who's a contemporary artist, and she worked with the local wrestling team, and they all were standing in the crowd in the Turbine Hall, and then suddenly they all came out and started fighting. But it was this really great way to involve the kind of local community and get them so that they had something that was accessible to them. They felt like they owned it. They were proud of this kind of performance, but it was also this kind of like very cutting edge contemporary art piece. So this was the kind of work that I wanted to show here. This kind of tick these boxes of being challenging, not reductive, but also accessible. And then of course Corona hit, which is which happened for everybody, unfortunately. And so I had this kind of contemporary art program planned, and I'd started talking to Lucia Pietroschi, who was the general ecology curator at the Serpentine Galleries, and also the curator of Sun and Sea Marina, which won the Golden Lion at the Venice Biennale in 2019. And I asked her to guest curate Power Night the following September. Corona hit, so of course we had to keep postponing, but she very much obliged, which was this huge success for me. And I said, let's try and bring Sun and Sea to Luckenwalde. And I knew this piece, this beach opera from Venice, and I knew it had this incredible impact on people. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't actually get to go see it in Venice because I was so heavily pregnant. But I heard that people would leave the work literally weeping because they were so affronted by their own complicity in the climate catastrophe. And I just thought, this is such a perfect vehicle to discuss the mission that we are trying to accomplish here at E-WERK. You know, you working with contemporary art to kind of raise awareness of what we're doing, but also taking action and actually enacting climate change that, you know, benefits towards affecting climate change. And so, and Lucia had heard about us through Power Night, and so she said, and she's got this real activist bone in her body as well. She's really keen to take action, so she was desperate to bring it here as well, which was great. So then we went about actually trying to think, how can we bring this piece here as a new institution? It's a phenomenally expensive work. So we launched a Kickstarter in order to raise 40,000 euros, which was a quarter of the cost that we needed to bring the work here. And I'll just show you a short clip of our Kickstarter so you can see what the work is.
This is Lucia. I am the curator of Sun and Sea, the Lithuanian pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2019 by Rugile Barciukaite, Vaiva Karainite, and Lena Laplite, and also the curator of Power Night at E-WERK Luckenwalde in 2021. E-WERK has been an example of an institution that thinks ecologically across all of the levels of its programming and infrastructure. It is entirely powered by 100% renewable electricity, Kunststrom, which is produced on site. I see it as a prototype for an art organization of the future. Help us bring this award-winning work of Sun and Sea to Luckenwalde. We'll be hosting it in the abandoned Stadtbad from the 1920s, and that unique setting will also give it some really extraordinary new properties. I join the entire team at E-WERK in saying thank you so much for any support.
So this was our campaign trailer, sorry. And we did it, we managed to raise the money, so that was fantastic. And then we also got a substantial amount of money from the state in Germany in order to realize it. So then we went about trying to get it here, and then in July last year, we opened Sun and Sea in the Stadtbad, and this is a picture of it here, which was this kind of incredible moment for us, to be honest, as a new institution, you know, to bring this very famous piece, very popular piece to Luckenwalde, and really felt kind of game-changing. And the fact that this curator and artists and everybody had put all this trust in us was really fantastic. And we had originally hoped to host about 5,000 people here, but due to the pandemic, we were only able to do 1,500, but it was still this really magical weekend for us. And then so we also invited Lucia to curate Power Nights, but because of the pandemic, we actually decided to flip the whole programming structure on its head. And instead of doing one night of programming, one kind of event, we have actually separated it into chapters that will unveil gradually over the course of a year. So this is chapter 1 of Power Nights, which is Sun and Sea. And then in October, we opened 2 installations, one by Caribbean Film Collective, which is here in our Turbine Hall, and then another by Himali Singh Swan, which is called Static Range, and this is in Gallery 1. And then in February, we will unveil a new work by Revital Cohen and Turvan Ballen in Gallery 2 called 3 Hearts, and also an intervention on the train, which comes from Berlin to Luckenwalde by Sissel Tolas and Isabel Lewis, and they will actually take over one of the carriages of the train with a smell intervention. So Sissel has been working with Pablo to extract a lot of the smells from the wood chips and the power station, and then this will be exploded into one of the carriages. It's a kind of smell, kind of all sensory intervention. And then Isabel is a choreographer, so she will do a performance in the carriages. And then in March, we're working with Cooking Sections, who were the recent nominees for the Termina Prize, and also Tabata Reza. And Tabata will take over our dome, which is outside a beautiful geodesic dome that we built in 2019 in collaboration with Umschichten, a German design collective. So yeah, and then in April, we will have the actual event of Power Night, and all the artists will come together, and this growing exhibition will be finalized and everyone will do their performances. So this is a kind of taster of the kind of contemporary art program that we host here at E-WERK. So yeah, that's who we are.